Seguramente ya debe estar en vivo. Vamos a probarlo en un momento. Mm, Vamos a ver. Vamos a checar. Canal. Mientras tanto, tengo que actualizar a Charles Swap. Aquí estamos. Listo, así está en directo. Bienvenidos, buenos días. Vamos a checar mercados. Vamos a estar aquí en la sesión en vivo. Acabo de vender Nvidia.
Vamos a ver.
Teníamos 58
Xiaomi is taking aim right
acciones.
now at Tesla, offering
Canal. Mientras
58
tanto, tengo que
acciones
actualizar.
compradas el
Rates coming in
8
and being a
de
catalyst
abril.
also. We're looking for 100 basis points of decrease in the next 6 months by the beginning of next year or in the first quarter of next year. And I think that the combination of the tariffs being in the rearview mirror, we've gone from 2.5% tariffs to 15% tariffs. We have crude oil significantly lower than it was last year, from $80 down to $66. All these things are extremely positive for the market and can be a catalyst for big moves up. And I think the biggest story is what's going on in technology. I mean, you have a new technology, artificial intelligence, that's the new electricity, not the new internet.
Yeah. Well, we could argue that that's why the market has been so strong and so resilient given all of these.
Sí, es la CNBC, pero no se ve. Está trabada. Vamos a ver mis compras. Ahí está. Aún no carga. No carga.
You said the handling of the administration of the
Pero sí
economy.
se
I feel like the
escucha.
market's given the president.
A menos que le ponga así y ahorita solo esperemos a que aparezca. Mientras tanto, lo que tenemos el día de hoy es que mercados andan al alza ligeramente, pero vamos lento y a la segura. Porque, perdón, miren, los índices estamos .50 arriba, .53, .49 para todos. SP 500 está en 6.122. O sea, ya teníamos un objetivo de 6.200 para este trimestre si no pasaba nada malo. Es decir, si no se, el mercado no caía, que por los aranceles o por situaciones geopolíticas, y cayó, por supuesto. Entonces la idea era, ok, va, para julio no lo alcanzaremos para el tercer trimestre del 2025, es decir, agosto, septiembre, octubre. Pues, ¿qué creen? Seguimos en junio y vean la tremenda subida que hemos estado teniendo sin importar toda la situación que ha estado pasando. Es decir, tanto las tensiones entre Irán e Israel, los aranceles y todas las demás noticias que podrían afectar a la bolsa, pues no la han afectado. Entonces seguimos de fiesta, seguimos de rally al alza. Ahora chequense esto. Tengo que encontrar mi precio del 8 de abril, que no lo encuentro. Yo recuerdo que fueron 97, 98, pero vamos a checarlo. 8 de abril, 8 de abril, 8 de abril, 97.51, sí, cierto. Ok. Listo, eso era lo que quería saber. Y necesito el tipo de cambio del 8 de abril del 25. O sea, acá lo saco. Mientras tanto, a ver, acá miren, tenemos igual. SP 500 acá lo tenemos en 6.129. Nasdaq. Ok. Interesante. Miren, el VIX, la volatilidad está bajando. Vamos a checarla en mis usados frecuentemente. Vamos a ir a la volatilidad. Aquí está, XX. Vean, 48.12. Lo interesante de esto es que su mínimo ya fue 47.98. Yo diría que no nos confiemos porque mañana se van a presentar datos al consumidor. Datos consumidor junio. Y eso, y también tengo que ver el calendario de... mm, ok, de investing. Investing es muy... Investing es muy bueno para calendario de datos económicos. Investing, aquí estás. Listo. Mientras tanto, Roland Emerging Market and Global AI Adoption. Ok, a ver.
Of course, companies like Tencent and Alibaba, and chips, of course, very critical. So, I think that, yes, all of the focus is on the US, but you wouldn't have the whole infrastructure globally without emerging markets. And I think that that EM companies deserve recognition for that.
Okay. When you think about, kind of the broader landscape of markets beyond the U.S., let's talk a little bit about China. There have been signs of some more of the consumer recovery there. How important is that to the emerging markets story and the sustainability of outperformance in emerging markets?
Yes, that's a good question. I think China, being the largest country, at least within the MSCI EM benchmark at about 30%, is very critical to that, because if China and India as well, and Brazil and some of the larger countries start to work, the sustainability of performance and interest in the asset class increases. Because as of now, there's been very limited flows to emerging markets overall. But I'd say that it attracts attention when the local domestic economy which is so, it's largely driven by consumer behavior and consumer sentiment and spending, in a country like China tends to pick up. It will attract attention, and I think it has been slow over the last 2 to 3 years, but that, I think, is natural from a sentiment standpoint.
Okay, Allison, great conversation. That's Allison Shimada, Allspring Global Investments. Allison, thank you so much for joining us today. Got a lot more to come here on Trading 360. Next up is the big three: 3 stocks, 3 charts, 3 trades. Rick Duquette goes through the technicals, and Dan Dimming takes us through the trades. On his list, Nextera, Arista Networks, and Stryker. That's next on Trading 360 here on Schwab Network.
Vean, hermosa la subida. Como les decía, sí vamos lento, pero seguro, así que... Wow. Ok. Bueno, estoy viendo acá los mensajes que me mandan. Vamos a cerrar esto. Dan Ives, Whitbridge Securities Trading. Hoy a las 11:30, eso es todo. Vamos a tener a Dan Ives en vivo el día de hoy. Y está bien, porque en sí tiene que hablar de, ¿cómo se llama? De toda la subida que están teniendo. O sea, chéquense, Tesla no anda con todo, o sea, anda como lento. Y no espero que suba, o al contrario, espero que baje, vean. O sea, 326, espero que baje. No estaría mal igual comprar unas 3 acciones, 5 acciones. O sea, no es a la segura, como con Nvidia cuando fue la caída, o como con United Health cuando fue la caída. O sea, y si se compran y uff. Te esperas, ¿qué? Estamos en junio, es abril, mayo, junio, 2 meses. 2 meses para hacer una rentabilidad de más del 40%, o sea, es una locura. Listo, ya tenemos esto. Listo. Y le tengo que escribir a Aldair. Ah, Sí, tengo que escribir a Aldair, no manches. A ver, entonces. mm, Ah, qué rico. A ver. Mm, ok, interesante, pero esto no se puede quitar. Ok. Y acá también esta, o sea, se multiplicó. No puede ser. Ok. Bueno, mientras vamos a checar esto porque tengo que estar checando todas las
The S&P
carteras.
500 trying
Hay
to
liquidez, la cual
reach
tiene que
those
ser
levels we saw
colocada.
back in February.
Entonces,
Impressive, to say the least, Diane. I mean, when you look at this market, yesterday we did see quite a bit of dispersion as far as price action, with some of the big tech names kind of leading the Nasdaq higher. But you know, the Dow was down, and the Russell, I believe, was down yesterday. And now you're seeing a widening or broadening of this move higher, where you, as you pointed out before this segment, how expansive this move is in various sectors of the market. So honestly, I mean, that's a good theme going into the end of the second quarter, is the broadening of the move higher as we are now pushing towards all-time highs. So I think it's a short-term positive, Diane, as repositioning the end of quarter, but nonetheless, you're still seeing a broadening now of the strength in the market.
It's so funny. It feels like we're going back to the hopes that were, circulating at the beginning of this year when everybody has all their New Year's resolutions, and that in January it was to talk about the broadening out of this market. And then we saw all that weakness in April. And It feels like we're, kind of doing a, not a 360, I guess it is. Let's talk about the first trade on your list. And I want to correct something when I said heading to break. It's actually Next Tracker. I mentioned Next Tracker, but it's Next Tracker we're looking at. It's outperformed the S&P 500 so far this year, but what's your view here?
So this is a stock that kind of flies under the radar. It's in the solar realm, and it's basically solar solutions and tracking solutions for industrial or utility, level solar operations, not only here in the United States, but globally, continues to expand. And I think, moving forward, that you're going to still see this theme continue to be built out from a global perspective. And this company has certainly found a niche within that sector. And so as this stock continues to work its way and evolve and grow, I think there's still opportunity here. And that's a name that we have owned for a couple of years now. And it's volatile, so it's going to test your strength sometimes. But in the longer term, you continue to see upside momentum.
Okay, we'll get into the details on your trade in a moment. Rick,
Sure.
Let's talk about this chart. What are you noticing about the chart here?
As Dan said, we've seen some volatility, but this stock has crossed above an important threshold and so far managed to hang on. What I mean is this: the 52 mark, this green line, roughly represents a gap down that we had. Then we, kind of were moving sideways for a while. High point, once again at the same point, low point, low point. So that 52 level really sticks out to me just from a technical standpoint here. We could also see, though, that our last earnings event here, we had a big push to the upside, very heavy volume spikes, meaning volume at least 50% greater than the 50-day moving average of.
ahora qué pasó.
Volume. So
Animó.
big push to the upside, heavy volume shows strong conviction on the part of traders. However, things have died down a little bit now. We are seeing momentum waning. RSI is trending downward here, and price has failed so far to make a higher close above this initial high point that we had here near 62 or so.
I'm saddened to say that I think the Democratic Party is becoming increasingly anti-Semitic and anti-capitalism. And the thing about it is,
Necesito más procesamiento. Ok. El sector que más está saltando es el de hardware para computadoras. O sea, Dell, Hewlett Packard, SMSI, magnífico, SMSI, porque también hay acciones, pero esa sí falta para que se recupere. Bien, 48. Ok. Es que sí hay muchas cosas que hacer, muchachos. Demasiadas. Mm, Down ahí va, genial. Tesla cayendo, ok. Vamos a ver. High low. No, esperen. Price change, high low. ¿Quién está cambiando más? A ver, Jefferson. En Face Energy, $42. O sea, magnífico, magnífico. Recuerden que las compramos en 34.50 y ahí siguen. De ahí que se queden. Yo espero un precio de 45. Circle, 218. SPN, ok. HIMS ya se está recuperando, o sea, inclusive la vendimos antes de tiempo, o sea, con esa, digamos que fue un comportamiento de trading intradía, es decir, la compramos, ahí sí ni tanto, la compramos un día y la vendimos al otro día, pero está subiendo bastante fuerte, entonces, mm, CMSI, el tema es que miren, ya se desgastó, o sea, se comienza a desgastar, o sea, sí están subiendo con fuerza, pero miren, ya se cansó, esa subida con fuerza ya se está cansando. Reddit, a ver. Mm, Reddit no está mal, pero. A ver, UCO 23, excelente, excelente. También la compramos en sus mínimos de $22, o sea. Eso fue ayer, ayer antier, esta semana estuvimos comprando UCO, de hecho. TNA, ahí va, ok. Merck, Uber, Amazon, Peten. Petén también ahí va, aunque esta no me confiaría tanto, o sea, sí se compraron las acciones, pero justo al llegar a un precio así es hora de vender, o sea, no podemos confiarnos con Petén. Netflix, máximos históricos, por fin rompe 1300, por Dios. A ver, 1300 de Netflix. Ujú. Triple Q, Pro. Ajá, ajá, ujú. Ok, vamos a poner, a ver. Esto sigue
Trend line. That is what
y
you
este de
would
acá
want
se
to see
trabó,
if you're
genial.
bullish for the most part here. But you know, the day is still young. These things can reverse. It's not gospel truth that it's going to happen this way. You know, fake outs can still happen. For now, though, price is moving beyond our volume node here. We would be looking to fill the gap near 108 for the bulls here. So that would be another upside area to watch. To the downside, volume profile point of control comes in near 87. The heavy trading area is just a bit below.
All right, not gospel truth there, but Dan, then what's the approach for how this plays out or how you're playing this one out?
Yeah, I mean, this
En un momento
stock
voy a hacer
is,
la publicación
again, it's a
De
volatile
Nvidia.
stock as we've seen that unfold in April and into May. But at the same time, it seems to be regrouping here. And I think the momentum is going to stay in place at least for the next couple of months. So today's trade example is a buy right, buying the stock to have exposure, direct exposure to the stock, and then selling the August 120 call for about $2.30. Now that was versus just below 101 on the stock. I think it's higher as we move through the session, but nonetheless, capturing some premium, but grabbing the stock at these levels and then having the opportunity to get possibly called away significantly higher, about 20% higher if it was to get there over the next 50 days. But really the idea here is to stock ownership in this trade example and then collect some premium over the next couple of months.
Okay, over the next couple of months, that's the approach there for Dan. So Dan, let's talk about the final trade on your list, Stryker. This obviously seems to, you know, show like what your viewpoints are in terms of healthcare. Stryker has been outperforming the S&P 500 year to date. What is your view now on it?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you look at healthcare, you know, you see various parts of that sector struggling this year, but Stryker continues to outperform, and it has for several years, really, when you look at the healthcare sector. And again, they've got a unique niche as far as devices and the things that they provide to the healthcare system. So company I'm very familiar with, Kalamazoo, Michigan. I grew up just outside of Kalamazoo. So again, that's another reason I wanted to feature this stock. But I think there's still upside momentum, similar to idea to ANET, that we're going to continue to see upside momentum over the next couple of months. So a buy right position is, again, the example today.
Okay, Rick, take us through what you're noticing about the chart here for Stryker.
Largely range-bound for the better part of the past year. We can see that notably we have this green line here, high point, breakout point, low point. And then, for the most part, we held on during the tariff news cycle. This was a very volatile time there. But if you look closely, we only closed below that area twice, and we rapidly recovered above it before continuing this upward price action here. But so far, we've been stopped once again near 398. High point, a series of highs that we did break out very briefly above. Didn't really make any strong gains beyond that level, though, and then faltered once more after testing it. Most recently, we did not quite even make it up to that level, but price is trying to push above those old highs now. We are not succeeding so far here, but we are above our moving averages. We've broken out of our downward sloping white trend line here. RSI also showing a breakout, much like we talked about previously here. Our red trend line is being invalidated. So if we were to look at volume profile, we could see here that the area near these highs, 390, matches up with our volume node here and a lot of our high price action. So price has kind of not really managed to stay above that 390, 395 level too much at all. So that could be an upside area to watch here. And then our +1 standard deviation channel comes in near 408. One standard deviation up from our blue linear regression line, our line of best fit, which we just crossed over yesterday here. To the downside, double bottom lows, our green line here, 371. That sticks out as an obvious supportive area to watch.
Okay, Dan, I'm going to send it back to you then on your approach for here, especially given the chart patterns that Rick just pointed out.
Yeah, exactly. As Rick pointed out, we are at a key level here, but unable to get through there. But at the same time, if we do get some further upside, as you pointed out, 408 is a level that I was watching as well in that range. And so today's trade example is, again, just this is a stock that has been sideways, but long term, it's, I think, still a stock that is worth owning. And that's why I wanted to feature it today. So again, buy writing this one because there's not a lot of option volume here. So that's the reason why I think it's probably better in this case to own the stock and then write some out of the money calls. Again, August, 50 days out, and you can collect about a little over 1% versus a stock, and then still have the opportunity to capture $25 to the upside if we continue to see this upside momentum. And if not, then you you get to collect some premium while you wait to see if the stock can catch another leg higher later in the year.
All right, that's Dan Deming, managing partner at KKM Financial, and our very own Rick Ducad. Thank you both, guys. Coming up next, we're going to spotlight this tech rally. We've seen the NASDAQ 100 hit record after record. The NVIDIA, belle of the ball there in that sector, striking for another new record. But there's still some laggards. We've got Dan Ives, the man himself, Wedbush Securities, on the tech rally.
UCO, ahí va, ok. Ahí va UCO con $2. Jean, ahí va con 1.
Morning Movers brings traders the biggest headlines to start the day, from volatile overnight swings to the earliest analyst calls. Get your watch.
Its partnership, it's partnering with other telehealth companies like Roe and
LifeMD
rally, to offer Wegovy at a discounted cash price for people who can't get the drug covered through their insurance. And so at this point, it appears that they are dropping Hims in place of Weight Watchers, and they say that they're also in talks with other companies, so we'll have to keep an eye out to see what more. And they're also offering a discounted price, $299, and then after that it's $499. So still significantly more than some of those compounded versions, but also a much bigger discount than the list price if you don't have insurance.
So another knock on Hims there, I guess. I'm partnering with Weight Watchers instead. Thank you, Angelica. We are watching Nike ahead of its earnings report later today. Shares are down more than 15% since the last report on March 20th. It's well off of the highs, more than 30% or so. Nike's been in the crosshairs with tariffs against China and other places where it manufactures, like Vietnam, but it has also been an uphill turnaround story. And by all accounts, it's not there yet. So Wall Street is expecting another decline in sales, 15% from last year. And the question for investors is when and how does that turn? So here are three things that I'd be watching on that front. Watch the wholesale revenues. This is CEO Elliott Hill. He's been in the seat for 8 months. One of his priorities was to mend relationships with wholesalers like Dick's and Foot Locker and others after years that Nike has prioritized direct to consumer. Let's see if there's any progress. Inventories. Nike's been in cleanup mode to cut down inventories, especially in key franchises like Dunks, Air Force Ones, Air Jordan Ones, to clear out for new products and new innovation, which has been what the turnaround has been all about. And then watch China. You know, the weaker consumer in China has hurt Nike. And now with tariffs, more nationalistic attitudes perhaps, is there any sign that it is looking up? Because local brands have taken share. So we'll be looking for a sign of return to growth in that key market as well. David, the biggest question when it comes to Nike is the visibility. And it's not so much the numbers, because we're not expecting much in this quarter. It's what will they say about guidance on the call? Will they give full year guidance, quarterly guidance? And what will Elliott Hill say about whether any of his turnaround strategies are bearing fruit and when we can look for any kind of inflection in margins and in sales and in traffic?
I mean, innovation by its very nature is new, but do they really have any innovation?
They'll talk about, you know, some releases. They delayed the Skims partnership, for instance, but, you know, there have been some running shoes that have done well, the new Pegasus, but that's the problem, is that Nike has lost share to some of these brands like Hoka and On, which are doing well. New Balance right now is doing very well.
Also on the clothing side as well, I would assume.
On the apparel side as well. So there's not, it just doesn't have that, no, right now. And that's been part of the reason why traffic has been sluggish and sales have been down for several quarters in a row now.
All right, well, I'm sure we'll be talking about it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, only 50. It's interesting on the street. You know, Jeffrey says buy the swoosh now, come in early ahead of the turnaround. It's a split. It's like 50% of analysts are on hold, 50% say buy, which is low for Nike in history.
There it is. Yeah, time to buy the swoosh. All right, it's also time for a news update. Silvana now has that for us. Silvana.
Hey, David. Good morning. Well, closing arguments are underway in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Prosecution rested Tuesday after calling 34 witnesses over several weeks. The defense rested its case without calling any witnesses. Combs has denied all charges. He faces decades in prison if convicted on all counts. The Trump Mobile website has scrubbed language indicating that the Trump phone is to be made in the USA. The website says the device is, quote, designed with American values in mind. Now, a spokesman for Trump Mobile dismissed the report, saying the phones are proudly being made in America. The change was first reported by The Verge. And The Social Network is reportedly getting a sequel at Sony Pictures. Deadline reports Aaron Sorkin is working on the follow-up to his 2010 hit, which profiled the early days of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. Now, the first film was directed by David Fincher, but Sorkin rumored to helm the sequel, which will be based on a 2021 Wall Street Journal investigation called the Facebook Files, Sarah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Silvana. Silvana Hanau. The former chair of the CFTC is coming up with us after the break with more on the Genius Act and the future of crypto regulation. Money Movers will be right back.
Crypto.
Ahora escuchemos a The Knives, ese es muy bueno.
And now from NVIDIA to Microsoft to Palantir, you're going to see a risk-on environment. I think we could be looking at tech stocks up 15% this year.
So AI clearly still the central theme within tech, but now there seems to be this divide between, you know, the leaders and the laggards in this group, especially when we think about the Mag 7. So what is separating, like what's the secret sauce for, say, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Meta versus, say, an Apple or Alphabet?
It's AI. I mean, when you look what's really been the overhang on Apple, it's because of AI. Because, I mean, we were there at WWDC, and like we talked about, that was a yawner. And that's why they're ultimately going to have to either do a Perplexity deal, do something significant, because they have the best install base in the world. Compare that to what almost called like CEOs right now that are laser focused. Look at Zuckerberg, what they're doing at Meta when it comes to AI. Look at Nadella. You look at the godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA, and that's why you're seeing those stocks, because it reflects where they are in terms of the biggest tech boom we've seen in the last 40, 50 years. But the bears and the haters, if you focus just on valuation, you've missed every transformational tech stock the last 20 years, and you'll miss all these, including names like Palantir.
Is it, when you think about AI for like NVIDIA, are we at the, kind of beginning or early beginnings of a new level of where it's like not a nice to have, but a need to have when you think about that? Like, for instance, with smartphones, right? Everybody didn't have to have a smartphone, but now you need one now. With AI, is it going to be so much part of the ecosystem that you need to have this, especially in your portfolio?
Yeah, you just nailed it. I mean, I think there's one chip fueling the AI revolution, and it's NVIDIA. There's no, I mean, look, there are, of course, other companies that are producing chips, but that's why globally, that's why there's only one godfather of AI, and his name is Jensen. And I think it comes down to...
Go ahead, sorry.
And it comes down to like the next leg of the NVIDIA growth story has just begun.
Okay. Well, it seems to be reflecting that obviously in the share price, and it's a very different perspective than we had back in April when there was so much pressure, and even the deep seek conversation seems to be an afterthought now. When you think about the Mag 7, should it even still be called the Mag 7, given that you have this bifurcation within the group, right? Is it still relevant as a group, or should we start looking at these differently, especially when you think about the underperformance as it relates to Apple?
Yeah, but look, I would just say, with about Microsoft, I mean, it underperformed for a while, and now look at it now, right, in terms of white hot, because investors have caught up. I still think you cannot just throw away that classification, because these tech companies, their install bases, and they're stronger going to get stronger. But it does speak to, you're not just going to group them all together. They each have different headwinds, different tailwinds, and right now there's clearly a sort of divide, especially when it comes to AI.
Do you think, when it comes to the conversation about tariffs, because some do worry about especially the tariff pressure as it relates to, say, Apple and Amazon, is that still something that, you have to figure out what the risk is when it comes to both of those companies?
Look, I mean, it's a risk, especially when it comes to Apple, given the China dynamic. But, it's our view that the administration is stepping further and further back. There's a de-escalation. We'll have some, scary headlines from some of the deals, but I think you'll have deals on the table, and that's bullish for tech, and I think it's bullish for the AI trade, especially when it comes to the U.S.-China trade deal. I think that's very, very important.
And so I want to go back to the point you made about valuations, because some point out that, especially some in this group are just too expensive, and it doesn't necessarily, the growth trajectory doesn't justify the valuation from some perspectives. What do you say to those critics?
I'd say to many of them, look, they're in their cave, their hibernation caves, because they can't see AI in the spreadsheets. I think it's just, you got to look out 3, 4, 5 years, an autonomous future, robotics, humanoids, enterprise AI, consumer AI. We're just in the beginning. The trillions that are going to be spent, and that's why I just focus on, like, there is just, it's a fourth industrial revolution that we just happen to be living in. And I think that's going to fuel a tech bull market next 3 years.
All right. Well, we're certainly fueling bull market in tech right now. That's Dan Ives, Wedbush Securities Managing Director and Senior Equity Research Analyst. Always great perspective, always great jackets as well. Coming up next, the disruptor, as George Solis joins us to take a look at Micron. It delivered a record quarter. Stock's been bouncing around. He'll break down the numbers and give us an example trade. That's next on Trading 360.
Okay.
Side of things, and as you pointed out, I did testify on Tuesday. There's a bill on the House side that has moved out of committee. So I think now the conversation has turned to market structure, which would give both the SEC and the CFTC authority to regulate the centralized exchanges and perhaps even DeFi, decentralized exchanges in the future.
Is the industry pushing back on that?
No, the industry, I think, is supportive of a thoughtful approach, and I think for them, it's an opportunity to really gain credibility, but also get certainty. You know, they're working in an environment in the U.S. where they don't truly understand what the rules of the road are. I think from a former regulator standpoint, my issue was always I don't have the tools to regulate bad actors and to identify fraud and manipulation. So I think there are two wins out of this, both legitimacy and credibility and clear rules of the road so that folks can grow and innovate and develop products. But also for the regulators, both federal and state, it's visibility into what's going on so that we can police and enforce the market. Because inevitably, there will be bad actors. We've seen that a lot over the past couple of years, and we need to root that out so the good actors can grow and have some certainty.
Well, I mean, Circle has made it a virtue, for example, that it is happy to have this regulation. Yeah. I think it's helped since it's gone public. Obviously, the stock has soared. Is it a concern for Tether, which obviously is not based in this country?
Well, I think, look, yet, but this was always an argument I faced talking to members of Congress. If we pass bills around crypto, it legitimizes this industry. And at a time in 22 and 23 when you had rampant fraud, big in scale, I think a lot of members in Congress were questioning why would they legitimize an industry that is so rampant with bad actors. But ultimately in the balance between an unregulated market where investors are getting hurt and legitimizing an industry, my take was we need to put regulation and guardrails around the industry. So you will see the companies that are involved succeed. They will grow because you will then have money on the sidelines that now feels more confident investing in the space.
Russ, I wanted to ask you about another. I know you were involved when you were at CFTC in the betting markets, because the news this week is that Kalshi just secured a $2 billion valuation with its latest fundraising round. Look, it predicted the Trump win, predicted the Mamdani win, which we were closely following here in New York. Polymarket not legal, right, for U.S. betting. Kalshi is. What's the story here with regulation?
Well, Kalshi came in years ago, and credit to them, they came into the CFTC back in 2018. I think I was at the commission at the time, wanting to always come in the regulatory fold. And they got their license several years ago and have been listing products. This is a growth area. There is no doubt about it. Prediction markets arguably are more accurate than polling or other sorts of identifying sort of wins or losses. The question that I had and that you and I discussed, Sarah, over several years, quite frankly, is
politics.
What is the line between what is legal, what is illegal? And I think it's a classic example of markets and technology moving faster than the law. So whether it's elections, whether it's sports, you now have contracts on the outcome of sporting events. A lot of state attorney generals are not pleased about this, gaming associations, tribal communities. So this is a situation where both the courts are making decisions on the elections front. A district court in D.C. ruled in favor of Kalshi last year, and the election contracts are trading.
You did not want that. You don't want to see betting on politics, right?
We banned it. I've been very clear about that since day one when I was in my former role. We took efforts to ban contracts on elections. We were sued and we lost, and that's fine. Federal district judge made that decision. We will move on. Now a question is arisen around sports. There's ongoing lawsuits around sports contracts. Again, state AGs, gaming associations, and tribal communities.
Well, it's an important revenue source for them as well.
It is a massive revenue source, and there is a big federal state legal issue that is being decided in courts. I also think it's really important for Congress to get involved because there are moral hazards with some of these contracts. It's one thing to have a contract on CPI, manufacturing data, Fed interest rates, right? Economic indicators, weather indicators, any number of things. But there are certain areas which I think the law needs to catch up with the markets and the technology because it will move very fast. And I think Congress needs to get involved because these are the types of contracts.
What would be an example of moral hazard then in terms of Kalshi and the prediction markets for elections?
Yeah, I always said on the election side, you have election contracts, you're making the CFTC an election cop. If there are allegations of fraud or manipulation in an election, whether it's a busted voting machine or a social media tweet about a candidate doing something or not doing something, you can manipulate markets. Do you want a market regulator overseeing potential fraud in an election? I personally don't think that's what Congress intended with a market regulator.
Markets gain popularity. Pues claro, todos los mercados van a ganar popularidad porque muchos estamos haciendo dinero en ellos. Así que es cuestión de tiempo. O sea, por eso la urgencia de democratizar las finanzas en México y pues, prácticamente en todo el mundo. Pero muchos o no les interesa hacer dinero o porque no saben cómo funciona, pero el problema es que tampoco les interesa saber cómo funciona. Entonces ya el problema ya no es el mercado, es el interés. Pero bueno. Acá miren, es el petróleo. Este es un ETF muy bueno que replica el comportamiento del petróleo por 2. Es decir, si el petróleo sube 1, este subirá 2% y así sucesivamente. Entonces, cuando se cayó después del conflicto de Irán-Israel, pues compra. O sea, obviamente se valoraron los mínimos y dijimos, pues 17 son los mínimos. Pero dada la situación actual, ¿cómo va a tocar los 17 si ya está subiendo los 23? O sea, ento- entonces, yo dije, bueno, tal vez a los 20. Pero aquí fue un conflicto más grande que lo que pasó acá. Entonces, este conflicto que pasó aquí no está al nivel de este. Entonces dije, no. Y aparte bueno, que aparte aquí el indicador ya marcó o una venta o una compra. Dado el contexto, una compra. Pero, pues así. Ahora, claro, ya se quiere caer, entonces tal vez se haya tiempo de vender, ¿saben? Ok, no sé. Vamos a buscar el precio. WTI price now. Vamos a buscarlo. 73.84. Un barril de petróleo. Está caro. Cabrón. Y acá ya me salió en 66.11. Mm, Si yo lo busco un mes, su mínimo es más, lo vamos a ver aquí. Miren. ¿Qué pasó? Ahora qué. Ajá. Aquí miren. Estamos un día, vamos a ponerle un mes. En un mes, por aquí me sale que es el 2020, 2025, o sea. Su mínimo ha sido 58 y esto fue el 1 de abril. Ahorita lo que estamos esperando es que alcance este 71. 71.90, 72, pero aunque estos fueron niveles, pues obviamente del año pasado. Entonces sería cuestión de esperar. Pero vean, su mínimo fue abril. Ahora vamos a ver el 1 de abril acá. Vamos al 1 de abril. Mm, Qué extraño, está en 27 y no debería. A menos que la correlación tenga que ver porque se cayó aquí. O sea, aquí estamos hablando de los aranceles. Estos fueron los aranceles. 7, 8 y 9 de abril fue Trump quien tiró los mercados. Aunque no estaría mal, también pues lo tomas en 19 para ganar $8, pues no tanto, ¿verdad? Pero el objetivo de esa explicación es ver que el barril de petróleo ha estado en tendencias mm, interesantes para ser comprado. Ahora el dilema es este. Ya se compró, ya dejó ganancia. ¿Qué hacemos? La clásica decisión de venta. Porque eso se compró esta semana. O sea, esta semana para generar cierta rentabilidad. Pero vean, también toca su máximo de 23.10 y comienza, aquí cayó y aquí parece que quiere caer. Pero bueno, vamos a ver, miren, ahí va de regreso otra vez para arriba. Vamos a ver. Mm, Mientras tanto necesito mi ventana. ¿Qué es esto? No, yo no quiero eso. Listo. Vamos a agarrarlo acá. Vamos a arrastrarlo para acá. Tariffs weighed on Fed Outlook. También no sabemos qué pasa con la Fed. Lo que está pasando con la Fed ahorita es que Trump no quiere a Powell. No lo quiere y lo ofende y le llama una persona estúpida. Así no se puede. Al final de cuentas, Powell está haciendo su chamba. Pero pues, el presidente es el presidente, ¿no? Mm, Vamos a checar. Copiar. Listo. Ah, listo. Ok. Vamos a agarrar esto. Listo. Ok, vamos a checar. Jobless claims, a ver.
The economy, how do you interpret all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with PJ in what he's saying in terms of kind of the trend. And the concern is the continuing claims, right? Highest number in 4 years. But I think it's really a non-event. I mean, it's definitely not going to be stopping the market from its march higher to all-time highs on a lot of the indices. But I think the underlying of why the bears and why it's not really a negative mover is just because it hasn't cracked, right? It's been tightening, it's been cooling, but it's been doing so gradually. And so I think that's where, again, in terms of market price action, the bulls are off running. But you do see a lot of negative revisions down. You do see it, again, continuing claims ticking up, unemployment ticking up, but it's kind of falling into what a lot of traders would consider that Goldilocks scenario. And so it's hard to grapple and sink your teeth into that as a bearish aspect, but it's definitely concerning not knowing if it's going to fall off a cliff in the next month or two.
PJ, I was watching an interview earlier today with Dana Peterson, who I'm sure you know well, and she was talking about the resilience, as you mentioned, in the job market. And one of the points that she brought up is it's not so much about people have jobs overall, when we kind of look at it, especially on a historic basis, but it's finding the next job is where people are having a difficulty.
Oigan, por cierto, ¿vieron que iba a llover
and if
temprano?
they lose a job, difficult to find a job. When you think about the June jobs report that's due next week, what matters the most? Is the headline payrolls number? Is it the unemployment rate? Is it wage growth or something else entirely, PJ?
Well, I think it's all of the above. We are continuing to see significant uncertainty. I think you're seeing it in the consumer confidence. So when you look at the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index, that fell 5.4 points in June, and the Consumer Expectations Index fell 4.6 points to 69. That's substantially below the threshold of 80 that typically signals a recession. So you're seeing some concerns among consumers and among businesses as well as they're trying to respond to this uncertainty.
And then, Tony, I'm curious to know your thoughts and expectations for that jobs report. Do you share similar views that it's every single, segment within that payrolls report that we get next Friday, or does one metric matter more, carry more weight than the other?
I think the one metric that should matter more is the downward revision, not necessarily the headline number, unless it's terrible. But I think it's really understanding, is that trend down, and why, 6 of the last months has it been revised down. And so I think that could be a catalyst in the market. And of course, in the market. And then, of course, understanding the labor force, right? Is that still coming down as well? And what does wage growth look like? And so I think wage growth and trend, and if it's being revised down again for May's report, I think it's going to lack a little bit of confidence of what June is going to say, because I mean, if you're revising down 7 out of 7 times, why not an 8th? So I think it'll bring a little bit of uncertainty into the market there.
Okay, and I want to correct something I said. I said next Friday just out of habit. My producer just reminded me in my ear that next Friday is the 4th. We get the numbers on Thursday. PJ, quick thought from you on how much, if any, weight we should be giving to ADP next Wednesday, given the weakness we saw last month.
Well, obviously, that's going to be a preliminary indicator of where the job market is headed. So I think we'll know more in the weeks ahead, and as we go through the summer months, and we see what the job numbers actually look like.
All right. Thank you so much to both of you. That's PJ Tabbett with the Conference Board and Tony Zaparro, Equity Set. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for joining us today on Trading 360. You've still got the S&P 500 with gains as investors look for records. Download the free Schwab Network app. It's available in the Apple App Store. And tune in 24/7 on schwabnetwork.com. I'm Diane King Hall. Stay with us. You've got Fast Market with Kevin Hinks and Tom White up next.
Mm. Genial. Ok. Pues no hay mucho. Vamos a checar, miren. Down. A la baja ya. QQQ. A la baja, pero se aferra. Se recuperó rápido. Vamos con el UPRO. UPRO, miren, bajó, intenta recuperarse y toma una dirección lateral. Y por último el TNA, que es el Russell 2000. A ver. No, sí, sufrió. O sea, entonces a la baja tenemos, miren. Vamos a ponerlo como default. Lo que sería TNA y U-Down, digamos que están comenzando a ir a la baja. Triple QQQ es el ganador, es el que siempre gana en la mayoría de los casos y el que le antecede es SP500. Vamos a checar acá. Ok. Uco, Lavo, QQQ, Jin, HIMS. ¿Tenemos HIMS todavía? Genial. Schemes. De Yin. Con una cosilla sería también hay una posición en Labo, a ver. Ok. Cool. $5.63, a ver. Vamos mientras para acá. Y Apple Model Done Reasoning Models in general.
Awful at very common sense things that you and I would do in our sleep. And that's, I think, a fundamental limitation of the reasoning models right now. That was not true in the previous paradigm. And by previous paradigm, I mean 2 whole years ago, when we were doing pre-training. Right. The new model would just be better at everything.
Well, that's where the market risk comes in. Wall Street is betting that smarter models, reasoning models, mean more demand for compute, more infrastructure, more upside for names like NVIDIA and the whole AI trade. But if the models cannot scale or generalize, all that spend might not lead to productivity. It could just be sunk cost. And that is something that has rattled the tech trade before, when progress stalled late last year and when DeepSeek showed the limitations of Western models and narrowed the gap between US and China. Now, reasoning is the new narrative, and with it, we've seen this rebound. It's also fueling Zuckerberg's recruiting drive, Jensen Huang's trillion-dollar bull case for physical AI, and it's at the crux of the Microsoft OpenAI relationship and whether a breakthrough in reasoning could trigger artificial general intelligence, ending that partnership and redefining who controls the future of AI. Put another way, this is a technical debate that is all over Silicon Valley and tech, and it has potentially massive financial consequences for Wall Street, and that is why investors should be paying attention. We break it all down in our latest Tech Check Take, AI's multi-billion-dollar blind spot. You can catch it on YouTube or on CNBC.com, Sarah.
Who are the companies that this would most impact?
I mean, it could impact everyone, the whole trade. It could impact NVIDIA, AMD, the cloud players, right? It's sort of what we saw at the end of last year when we saw that pre-training phase. It hit a wall, the data wall, and people were wondering, where's the ROI, right? Investors wondered, where do we actually make money from this thing? Reasoning is hailed as the next big breakthrough, but what an increasing number of researchers are finding out is that it's not actually that smart. So does the market take a pause again and think, hold on a second, we need to see the return on investment here before we pour hundreds of billions of dollars more into these models, developing them and buying into the promise of them.
Can't all these genius
Literalmente mi
engineers
computadora
going
está
between
colapsando,
OpenAI
pero
and
bueno.
Facebook for $100 million signing bonuses figure this out?
They're all working on it. And I mean, reasoning models are supposed to be getting better and better and keep the AI boom going. But, you know, something that Ali Ghodsi says, who works in this space, who's very familiar with it, is that they just can't generalize. So what we need are very specific, specialized models. That might be enough, but that's not AGI. That's not super intelligence, all these things that Mark Zuckerberg and Jensen Huang and others are working on.
Okay, Deirdre, thank you.
Ánimo, si se puede. Definitivamente me urge más potencia. Ok. Analyst. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco. Ahí está. Bien. Ahora $22.83, claro, por los centavos. Ok, va. A ver, en lo que voy al baño les dejo este de aquí.
This negative news, this overhang uncertainty, and yet the stocks continue to melt higher. And then to make new highs, you know, we haven't gotten the S&P like you right around there, 12 points below there right now. NASDAQ makes new highs, though. Then you get potentially some performance chasing, some FOMO that comes into play. The animal spirits are in the market. Some of the price. It has been a tech-led market here with, you know, technology is up, you know, almost 9% over the past 20 days here. NVIDIA breaking out to new highs. I know we're going to talk about that, but that's just kind of, you could call it a leading indicator that, hey, we need to reset once again the valuation around the AI trade because we've received additional data points, events via earnings, via these power announcements, etc., that are revising some of these forecasts in terms of the TAM. And that's what the market is going through right now. So it's really that AI trade which is helping a lot. And then on a near-term basis, a lot of the mechanics can be that if you get an additional incremental bit of good news, the algos kick in and they begin to move the market up. So let me give you an example. We're at all-time highs. Let's say that we get some news that the EU and the US have come to a framework deal. The algos take that information because they assume we have all the information that we have right now. Price reflects that. If we get a new incremental piece of positive news, then the algos kick in and push the market up. And so it can, on a near term, those mechanics are in play as well. And it's such a news-driven market with all of these potential tape bombs and potential tape gifts that are coming out of the White House.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I've been hearing that the retail traders were really getting into the markets in April. Now institutions are playing catch up. It seems like the ceasefire is lending some support. But there's other asset classes out there, Kev, that are also lending support. We got the dollar at over 3-year lows. We got the, you know, the 10-year yield at month-and-a-half lows. So it feels like there's some other asset classes that are helping support this equity rally, right?
Yeah, you know, the dollar is such an interesting discussion to have, right? Because you ask any politician and they want a strong U.S. dollar. But a lower U.S. dollar that everyone seems worried about is so much better for U.S. multinationals, right? And selling any goods overseas, it's really, they're cheering a lower dollar. And by the way, when they say the dollar's low, look at a 20-year history of the dollar. It's not that low. It's been a lot lower than it is right now. So I don't think the dollar is any panic button to be hit. Yields, now that's a different story, Tom. Yields continue to creep lower. Why? Because I think these members of the Fed, starting with Christopher Waller a week ago Friday, are starting to turn the narrative around where we get back into rate cuts. And I think that is, you know, building like a foundation behind this market. And Nate made a great point. The news coming out of the White House, geopolitical news, it's all skewing positive. You know what that news doesn't recognize? Valuations. Right? And valuations get high. Why is Micron down on their earnings? That was a great earnings report. Why? Because it's up 35% in a very short period of time. So there's a lot going on here, but valuations are starting to get stretched out. And you know what that makes this market? Fragile.
You know, Kevin, it's almost to this point now where the risks might be to the downside. You know, the VIX is at 1640 right now. It's not reflective of any uncertainty in the markets whatsoever. And that's what scares me when I see, you know, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Broadcom and Palantir, all these stocks at all-time highs. You mentioned Micron was up above 135 a share after that results yesterday. The stock's down now on that news because it had run up 35% this month into the report. So when I look at the RSI levels, Kevin, in Microsoft, which is nearly 80, in NVIDIA, which is above 74 at this point, AVGO, overbought on a technical basis. Is that what investors and traders should start to realize is that, hey, the risk might be to the downside, just a little bit maybe in the near term at this point?
Yeah, and you know, but Tom, on the other hand, we are in a summer trading environment. And as you know, summer can go for a while. It can drift higher. And when it's drifting higher like it is today, in my opinion, look what they do to the VIX. The VIX is getting hit. And the VIX, remember, the all-time average for the VIX is about 15.39. So it can go lower, especially in summer. Will it? Now, I don't know about that. If we're at all-time highs and we start backing off, the VIX will hold here. But the VIX could really get, if we start getting into like a lazy, drifting higher July trade, they could punish VIX here, Tom, lower. You and I have both seen it significantly lower than it is right now. So the fact that we're at all-time highs probably puts a little bit of bid into the VIX just because people are probably, like I said, this is an unloved rally. And you ask most of the people out there, they are not bullish. Maybe that's why we continue to go higher.
Yeah, that's the bulls are getting faded here. And then, you know, to your point, Kevin, we're going into July. Over the last 10 years, July's averaged over 3% gains for the S&P 500. So, hey, maybe the runway is still there. But, Nate, give me your take here. You know, I just mentioned to Kevin the fact that a lot of overbought stocks at these levels, valuations for PE on the S&P 500 above the 22 level. But nobody cares about any of the potential headwinds out there. You know, we had a GDP number that was below expectations, even though it was skewed by imports. But, you know, is the economy enough and robust enough to hold up these gains and this rally that we've seen?
Well, that's certainly priced in, given the current valuation here. You know, right now the market's basically saying this based on the price action. This AI secular growth story is going to be, it's still going to be incrementally more bullish for growth and for productivity. The tariffs, the inflationary impact were overestimated. The tariff deadline's coming up, but we expect good news. The Fed is on our side. We expect the economy has demonstrated that it's been able to hang in there via the hard data, and we expect double-digit earnings growth. I mean, all of that is basically priced in. So we've got 2 weeks before we get to this July 9th window here. EU and Japan are big ones. China has a further deadline that goes out. But even between China, they put a 6-month window on the rare earth imports, which kind of tells you that there's likely still going to be some haggling, some back and forth. But the market is priced right now that, hey, look, we can still move higher on some incremental good trade news, and we don't expect inflation to come back into the picture. And that could set us up, at least at some point, yeah, we're going to get perhaps a reset. But we need, I think the market's just basically saying, you know, show us the data. You got to really show us. We saw weekly claims creep up for a couple of weeks. We did not eclipse the high water mark at 250K. We were down 10,000 as reported this morning. So there just isn't enough to kind of rattle the bulls at this point. But there's always that potential as we approach this deadline of the window on July 9th.
Yeah, definitely on that. You know, as Kevin mentioned, a little bit fragile here. But Kevin, you mentioned the fact that Waller, Bowman coming out saying, hey, you know, July is a live event as far as a rate cut goes. Fed Chair Powell, during his testimony, kind of pushes back against it once again. The rhetoric out of the White House and the administration is like, hey, you're behind the curve, you know, and some other disparaging remarks and stuff like that. But then, you know, you got Goolsbee coming out today, Barkin coming out today, and they're saying, you know, we're not in a hurry. We're still going to look at the data. And then if we need to cut, we will. And that's, you know, I think what the market's betting on is the fact that, hey, if that PCE isn't hot tomorrow, is that going to be one of those things, triggers for the Fed where, hey, maybe July is on the table because the expectations are only about 22% right now?
Yeah, exactly. Now, the expectations are still low, but they're higher than they were, Tom. And you're right. PCE year-over-year headline tomorrow is supposed to go from 2.1 to 2.3. Core is supposed to go from 2.5 to 2.6. Both those year-over-year numbers are supposed to tick up, despite the month-over-month numbers are expected to be 0.1 and 0.1 on core. So it's going to be interesting to watch if these numbers come in and get more soft numbers, or, you know, in line or slightly lower, because right now the look is for higher. That's going to add to that narrative that the inflation so far, the bulls narrative, the lower interest rate narrative has been inflation's not showing up. You keep waiting for it. It's not showing up. It's like free beer tomorrow. You keep waiting for it to show up, and it's not showing up anywhere. At some point, are we worried? Now, Jerome Powell says it's coming. He says it's coming in the summer. To his benefit, or to his rescue, the PMI numbers showed some higher numbers early in the week. So there's that. So this is going to play out, and it's going to be a little tricky. And then, what is it? Is it one-off? Is it lingering? Is it transitory? What does this inflation look like, Tom? I think sitting at all-time highs with geopolitical risk all over the place, you know, I'm not surprised that things are getting a little dicey up here, for sure. But right now, mid-July, kind of interesting trade here. Slow.
Yeah, and Nate, if you look at this, could that be the trigger tomorrow? What if, you know, inflation data on the PCE side actually does come in a little bit hot, and then everybody kind of starts pushing back expectations for a rate cut? Because remember, 7 members said no rate cuts this year, and that Summary of Economic Projections, that dot plot, this past Wednesday. So could that be the trigger with the markets fragile at these levels? You know, maybe a little bit of give back, especially if we hit all-time highs today.
It could be an excuse for some profit taking, but again, if you look over the CPI and the PPI and the PCE, all these monthly data and, you know, reports that we've gotten over the past couple of months, they've been benign, and they've largely, you know, yes, like Kevin's saying on like the ISM, the prices paid index, yeah, that's been coming through hot. But other than that, the actually hard data that's coming out, the monthly CPI, PPI, PCE, that's been benign. So even if we got, 1 month of it, would that be a big deal? I don't think so for the markets. I think they would need more than that. If the Fed only gives us, let's say the Fed doesn't even cut this year, and they're looking out to next year, would that deter the markets? I think as long as the earnings story is there, the AI growth story is intact, and the double-digit expectation for EPS growth in 2026, if that stays intact, that probably still allows the markets to, melt up in a sense, because we've been at these quote-unquote restricted levels for a while, and yet the economy demonstrates that they're not that restrictive, and so I think the market's okay with it.
Yep, that seems like the market's optimistic, but until it breaks or something comes along, create some headline risks, maybe hit those all-time highs, and maybe there's some more runway. Who knows? Julys are usually pretty good, coming off the best May and June that we've had in years. All right, Kevin, we're going to wrap it up here. Go to break, but when we come back, we're going to talk NVIDIA. Chipmaker stock hit another record high today, is back to the top of valuations as far as companies in the marketplace. Stick around. Fast Market's coming right back.
Nvidia Hit, sí, ya, pues ya es momento de venta de Nvidia, claro. A ver, vamos a actualizar esto. De por sí, ando en chinga aquí en la sesión de bolsa porque hay que estar comprando, vendiendo, supervisando, viendo inversiones, tomando decisiones y es complicado. Genial, TechL está a nada de pasarse en verde, es una maravilla, pero, a ver. Ok, ok. Tenemos liquidez, genial. El tema es este. Lo que estoy evaluando en este momento son los datos que mañana se van a publicar de gasto al consumo personal. Entonces, yo opino que van a ser malos, bajos. Entonces el mercado puede que lo tome mal. Porque yo diría, pues me engancho al rally junto con mis clientes, pero no es una decisión prudente. Prudente en el sentido de que es mejor a veces hasta guardar la liquidez como cash is king. Eso lo enseña mucho Berkshire Hathaway. Entonces es mejor esperar por ahora. Y claro, o sea, trato de buscar un activo barato y lo más barato que podría encontrar, y eso ya ver, es el petróleo en este momento. O sea, sí está bajo comparado con todos los demás. El ABU en las últimas horas, vamos a ponerlos a 10 todos. O sea, su mínimo ha sido $32, va chido. Pero su piso, o sea, no hay como un piso como tal, o sea, eso hace volátil el activo. Entonces, volátil es que se pueda caer a los 45 o a los 55, y entonces, ¿qué onda, no? Ahora, la otra es que también está tocando su piso en 63. Entonces, ¿por qué no comprarlo en 63? Pero, o sea, ese es el tema. Aparte de la sesión, lo más barato que estuvo fue 56, $1 menos. Oh, interesante. Ay, tengo que publicar la venta de Nvidia, sí es cierto. ¿Qué haremos? ¿Qué haremos? Mm, ok, ok, ok. Ok, Interesante. Un brillo. Ok. Ok. Estoy viendo varias cosillas. Va. A ver, esperen, pero ¿por qué aquí no está? Sí como tal, pero ya veremos. Ya veremos qué pasa, qué pasa. A ver, Nvidia 155, average. AMD. Claro, por la nomenclatura de la acción está subiendo más Broadcom. ABGO. A ver, acá ya nos actualizó. Acá tenemos el ABU. 5805. A ver. Desde todos los low high. A ver, ¿quién está cayendo? How? Ethereum. No puede ser. Cayendo otra vez. Me lleva. Tex. Sí, claro. Cayendo, vean. 27.39 es su mínimo. O sea, cuando pase algo malo va a ser muy bueno comprarlo. Pero bueno. Walmart cayendo. O sea, no tuvo rally Walmart. Ok. Tractor Supply es una de las que tenemos, pero es a largo plazo. O sea, 3, 6 meses. ¿Qué más tenemos? Cabo también, aunque pues, será cuestión de ver. A ver. A ver, vamos a poner esto. O este.
And that hit a record high today. So I think J.P. Morgan's the best run bank in the world. It's our largest holding in one of our dividend portfolios. It's our largest holding in one of our dividend portfolios. And, you know, I think they have benefited from conservatism and from being the safe choice. And we're not changing that. I think at the margin, if you want to focus on a business that has not done as well and has the possibility to have some cyclical receleration and optionality in it, and it's not expensive, it's Jefferies. Well, I mean, okay, and Jefferies is down a lot year to date, right? We've owned it for a long time, so we're still up on Jefferies, but it's given back a lot. I think it's down 30% year to date. But if you listen to their earnings call, their M&A pipeline is building. They're very excited about the capital markets activity they're going to see in the second half of the year. They didn't miss by as much as they thought. It was down, but it was not down as much as people thought from an earnings standpoint. And, you know, I think they're very excited for that. So if you want to have some things that are working and ride that momentum wave and marry them with other assets that have embedded optionality to this broadening out trade thoughtfully, I think that's a great way to do it. Anybody care about what's been happening with the dollar before I get to Bitcoin and the fact that it's been sitting this little run out?
Positive tailwind for multinational companies. I wouldn't buy stocks because of it. And if the dollar were up, I would give you the optimistic side of that too. I know of no people on the planet, I could be wrong, who utilize the dollar as their predominant lens through which to decide how big or small their equity allocation should be.
We do. You know one now. So
you're predominant.
I bring
the dollar is the most important thing
as it relates to international investing. It is the
different conversation.
Okay, but different you said you were talking. So where is it?
I bring it up. An international stock tailwind.
Yes. I bring it up because the more that Trump pounds on Powell, the more the dollar goes down. Okay, the dollar's pacing for its worst first half in decades, not years. Decades. Dollar index is at a 3-year low. Josh sees the positive side of it.
good for multinationals, obviously.
And internationals.
And
international. Your portfolio.
Yeah. So
it's certainly
the buck, pardon the pun, stops there.
It's certainly something, as Arsenio Hall used to say, things that make you go, why when we have these risk-off moves are we seeing the moves that we've seen in the 30-year? Why does the dollar continue to weaken when these have consistently been safe haven trades? And now they're not acting like some other safe haven trades.
What is Bitcoin acting like as the market approach? Well, is it? Tanea McKeel joins us now. Because it really isn't rallying, despite a lot of inflows and despite what this market's doing. What's up with that, Tanea?
Yeah, Scott, $4 billion of inflows into Bitcoin ETFs this month, but the price of Bitcoin itself only up about 3% in that same time. So there's a missing piece here. We talk so much about the buyers. There are the sellers, which are these mega whales who are likely Chinese miners. We have data from CryptoQuant showing that while ETFs and corporate treasuries have been big buyers this year, that's mostly being almost perfectly offset by the selling by bigger whales. So check out buying from wallets with 100 to 1,000 Bitcoin. Those are likely the ETF wallets as well as corporate treasuries versus selling from the over 1,000 Bitcoin and over 10,000 Bitcoin cohorts. So this, Scott, is one reason Bitcoin's price is stuck. It's evidence of a big shift in ownership in the Bitcoin market. Retail, so under 1 Bitcoin, for what it's worth, those are sellers too, but they're kind of an insignificant cohort at this point, unlike in previous cycles. And it could mean we see traders adopting more sophisticated options-based strategies or turn to proxies and treasury companies for their Bitcoin returns. Scott?
Tanea, thank you. That's Tanea McKeel. You have a thought on this? You still own some Bitcoin, don't you?
Yeah. Look, I don't pretend to know what drives the price of Bitcoin. I talk to a lot of people who are much more involved in the ecosystem, and they have interesting theories. But my take is that this is now a central part of the ecosystem. It's being sponsored by 13 ETFs. trillion-dollar companies that issue ETFs. So we should start thinking less about this as some anomalous thing from another planet and more about it just as yet another asset class that people buy and sell on a daily basis for various reasons which are unique to them. And it's really hard to divine on any given day why it might be up or down $600 per coin. I don't even try to.
Let's take a look at Circle, which is up huge today. Obviously a recent IPO, up 600% since, and really volatile. There it is. I mean, a big move today, but you look at what it's done the prior days, down more than 15% over the last couple of days, just to point that out. No ownership here?
Well, I think what will happen on the Circle front is that you're going to get 5 more of these in the form of IPOs in the second half of the year. You could see Kraken, Gemini filed. You'll see a whole host of companies capitalizing on the obvious excitement around digital asset infrastructure plays, which is what Circle is. And the valuations won't make sense because there's a ton of scarcity right now. Circle, for example, almost approaching the valuation of Coinbase. Coinbase makes more money from Circle than Circle does in net income because of the distribution fees. None of it makes sense at all. If there were 20 of these things trading, probably multiples wouldn't be doing what they're doing, but there aren't. And so U.S. equity managers who want to have exposure to crypto and can't themselves buy Bitcoin, can't themselves buy any other assets in the ecosystem, they can own Coinbase, they can own Robinhood, they can own Circle, and they can tell their board of directors, hey, look at us, we have crypto exposure. So that's a big part of the story. It's fine. I'm not in the stock. I have no issue with it, but people should understand that that's what's driving these names.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Coming up, more on today's top movers, plus our calls of the day. And later, Josh Brown, he told you he's got a new stock, his best stock in the market list.
Get
best
ready.
Stocks in the market list. Hit a new 52-week high today. We're back in 2.
We're going to write the future of healthcare, one where care is more personalized, more accessible, and much lower cost. This IPO is an important moment, but it is still just the beginning of our story.
It won't be hard to find someone to fix this. But before I started Angie's List, different story. A lot has changed for us at Angie since then, but the issues facing homeowners are the same. And the solution too, skilled local pros.
Y al rato por esa musiquita me van a banear. Creo que no sé si ayer no hubo directo, ayer fui a hacer home a otra oficina, estuvo bien, padre. Pero ayer no hubo directo por eso. Solo hice una publicación y ya. Sí. Reporte de pago y publicación. Ok. Orden de las small caps. Y anotar los depósitos de las cuentas, justo. Ok. Listo. Ok. Vamos a checar. ¿Saben qué? Mi teoría conspirativa ahorita es que mañana los datos van a salir mal y este va a subir. Pero no puedo estar tomando decisiones con esa base que no es ni científica ni estadística, nada. Pero tengo un presentimiento en que mañana los mercados se van a caer. Aparte, estamos de rally. Estamos viendo que ya se están desacelerando las fuerzas con las que abrió la bolsa, por ejemplo el Nasdaq. O sea, vean, $80 y se mantiene todavía, pero todos los demás todavía no. Netflix, bueno, otra vez ahí va levantándose a los 1300, pero no me confiaría tanto. Por eso digo, cash is king. Liquidez manda. Madres. A ver.
For its worst week ever. You flagged this to our crew.
It's something that I've never seen before. So the stock started this week with a 35% crash because they had a joint venture with Novo Nordisk to sell I shouldn't say legitimate, to sell branded version of Wegovy versus the compounded version that they've been selling. And then Novo Nordisk, after a month, put out a press release basically accusing them of false advertising and endangering patients and pulled out. So Hims got crushed, but the thing is, they still have millions of users who like that platform. I don't know if this is a news flash. People don't like going to the doctor and face-to-face talking about erectile dysfunction, balding, or being fat slobs. So I'm speaking for myself. All right, so I think like when you think about whether this stock could recover or not, I think you go with the distribution versus the original product manufacturer, because Hims could pivot to selling any other version, and there are now 10 of them. So maybe this sell-off got overdone, and I thought it was an interesting story to mention.
All right, JetBlue, the second largest investor to consider selling the stake, their stake, according to Reuters. It's a near 10% stake. Jenny, you own the stock. That's not that big of a reaction to, I guess, a news headline that would lead you to believe that the stock might be down more if the second largest investor was considering selling the stake.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is so beaten to nothing, but I want to share another nugget of wisdom from my exciting week of conferences. So the subject of value traps came up, and one of the portfolio managers who was presenting said a lot of our best performers were the worst performers. Be careful not to be too quick to deem something a value trap. And I think this has been a terrible stock. But the reality is things are going better than they were. They should start. There's a new management. They started in February of 24, so a year and a half. I don't think they've had quite enough time to really start to turn things around. But if there's any improvement to earnings growth, if they could ever get back to $1 a share, they used to be at $2 a share. It's really cheap, and there should be some improvement. But I think that's the point of the response.
Why do you own the stock still?
Because we don't think it should be sold here. I think there's upside potential. So every time you own something, you look at it as what's the opportunity cost. And, just to beat myself up a little more, how we were talking about Organon over the last couple weeks? Yeah. And I didn't sell Organon when it had its big hit down to 8. Now it's above 10. So even though things get just shellacked, sometimes they're down too much. And I think there could be upside.
You go to a lot of conferences.
I know. It's why I'm so smart.
Okay. Hey.
Why don't they do a reverse?
It's a big vote of confidence for the conference circuit.
Why would they allow themselves to have a $4 stock? Why not do a reverse stock split? Nobody could buy this.
Maybe they should.
Like institutional investors are not buying it under 5.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
But but I don't know why they're not doing it.
They don't want to see a stock that's under $5.
All right, up next,
so
Josh.
maybe they'll listen to you.
We got Josh Brown's best stocks in the market list ahead. First, though, Silvana now has the headlines for us. Hi, Silvana.
Hey, Scott, good afternoon. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, today claimed victory over Israel, saying the country was crushed under the blows of the Islamic Republic. In his first public remarks since the U.S. strikes last weekend, Khamenei also claimed the country gave the U.S., quote, a big slap in the face in its attack on the airbase in Qatar, adding that Iran would not surrender. Meanwhile, the Pentagon this morning releasing footage showing how bunker buster bombs work in a test of the 30,000-pound munition, which is the same type used in the Iran strikes, which the Pentagon says is the largest ever operational strike by B-2 stealth bombers. And in Gaza, Israel has reportedly stopped humanitarian aid from entering for 2 days. That's according to Reuters, and it comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Wednesday there were indications Hamas was seizing aid. Israel has yet to comment, but the Higher Commission for Tribal Affairs, which represents influential clans in Gaza, said trucks were protected as part of a security process. Halftime report, we'll be right back.
CNBC News Update is sponsored by Morgan Stanley, where old school hard work means bold new thinking.
Okay. Interesting. It's for me, man, but it's okay. Ok, vamos a ver que tengo que hacer una llamada ahorita, no lo había previsto, justo era lo que estaba checando. Vamos a checar índices, a ver, vamos a los índices. Índices, aquí estamos. Ujú. Ujú. Ja, los osos. El café quedó muy bueno esta vez, ya quiero otro. Mm, 0,66, 67, 1. Russell, 1%. Me down, 0.80, todos arriba. Mínimo 0.60, SP500 Nasdaq. Ok. Y eso sí, porque son los que ya se desaceleraron. Antes estaban al revés. Estaban arriba del 1 y los demás abajo de 1, justamente. Pero bueno, bien. Tengo que desconectarme un momento, son 10:38. Tengo muchas cosas que hacer. Tan solo el día de hoy tengo que terminar. A ver, 1, 2, 3, 4. Tengo que hacer lo de la llamada. Y nada más, eso es todo. Entonces tengo 5 pendientes para el día de hoy y los tengo que cerrar. La bolsa cierra a las 2, ya sabemos eso, pero seguramente hasta me voy a quedar a las 3 viendo las noticias con ustedes. Pero bueno, voy a desconectarme, a lo mucho me voy a desconectar 1 hora. Espero sea 1 hora. Porque inclusive he estado pensando, o sea, solo pauso el directo, cierro la cámara y lo dejo en vivo y después ya lo edito otra vez en vez de volver a publicarlo. Entonces, no lo sé. A ver, vamos a intentarlo. Ah, no, pero es que necesito los micrófonos. No, entonces no, no. Sí, me tengo que desconectar. A ver. Sí, sí me tengo que desconectar, ya valió. Ok. Bueno, entonces voy a desconectarme y en un momento voy a conectarme de nuevo, ¿vale?